Welcome back, everybody, to our studies in AQA A-level politics. Now that we have looked at direct democracy, the idea of direct democracy, as well as a major example of direct democracy inside the UK's political system, i.e. the use of referenda, this lesson is going to focus on the idea of representative democracy. Representative democracy, of course, being the system that we utilise in the United Kingdom. Here is the specification. We're looking at representative government in this lesson, and like I said, we've moved away from looking at the idea of referenda as a means of direct democracy. This lesson is going to start talking about the idea of representative democracy. And just like with looking at direct democracy and looking at referenda, the first thing that we're going to do is ask the question of what actually is a representative democracy. What does it mean to call something a representative democracy? Well, the basic definition is, of course, this idea that a representative system of government is one in which citizens, instead of directly voting on law and policy themselves, they elect representatives who then go on to make decisions and to pass laws on behalf of those citizens, i.e. constituents. You have a little constituency, which is an area of land that a particular member of parliament represents. People in that constituency vote for who they want to represent them in parliament. And then they, when they are in Parliament, they pass laws and they do all the political stuff as their full-time jobs in order to essentially represent the citizens that they have back at their constituency. The aim of a representative democracy is to maintain a certain degree of democratic input and to maintain a certain degree of democratic representation, but to be more practical when it comes to the large, complex societies where direct participation of all citizens in every decision would be impractical. So it essentially aims to alleviate the problematic elements and the problematic aspects of the system of direct democracy. With that being said then, what are the basic features of a representative democracy? The first of these features is, of course, the idea of an election. Citizens will elect representatives. They do so on and at regular intervals, often and in the United Kingdom for a term of about 5 years, unless a snap election is called. And they do so on and in regards to all varieties of different levels of government. So a general election, of course, refers to the members of Parliament, the makeup and composition of Parliament and the makeup and composition of the government that is built out of Parliament. But you also have local, regional elections as well. Prior to our leaving of the European Union, we also had supranational elections, elections to the European Parliament. These elections must be free, they must be fair, and they must be competitive in order to ensure that the will of the people is accurately reflected. We remember that this was one of the basic core features of democracy that we examined in an earlier lesson. In order also to have a representative democracy, one must also have representatives. An elected representative will form the legislative body, i.e. Parliament or Congress, if we're talking about, for example, the United States. And these are responsible for making laws, they're responsible for setting policies, they're responsible for overseeing the government. In our quite unique political system, where there isn't a separation between the executive and the legislative branch, there's a fusion of those two institutions, we actually see that what Parliament is also responsible for is a recruitment pool for government, because government is formed out of Parliament in the UK's political system. Another feature of a representative democracy is the idea of constituency. Representatives will often be elected from specific geographic areas. These are known as constituencies, and this ensures that various regions and communities have a voice in government. Now, a constituency is often divided mostly and as closely as possible on the basis of population, so that's how it is divided up, but it is divided up into 650 individual constituencies, each individual constituency representing a member or having a member of Parliament represent them in Parliament. And as populations change and as some areas get more or less people than other areas. The constituency border maps will actually change over time as well. This is just a common feature of the representative democratic system. Another feature of representative democracy is the idea of political pluralism. Representative democracy supports the existence of a multi-party system, essentially allowing for a variety of different political parties that all represent different ideologies and all represent different interests, and the ability for anybody to actually get onto the ballot and be allowed to run as a member of parliament. This is why you end up with joke parties such as the Monster Raving Loony Party. This is how you end up with joke candidates who are able to get votes and therefore stand as part of the democratic process. It can be quite silly and it can cause you to have a bit of a laugh sometimes, but at the same time, even though it is quite silly and even though it is quite funny in some situations, it represents a fundamentally important element of our system. The idea that anybody and everybody has the ability to be a member of parliament, has the ability to run for office and run to try and make the country better in one way or another, in the way that they believe is the case. Representative democracies are very, very common, especially within the Western world. For example, the United States has a representative democratic system. They have a federal republic with a presidential system, a presidency. Citizens elect representatives to local, state, and national legislatures, as well as electing the president. The system includes checks and balances, as well as executive, legislative, and judicial branches. The United Kingdom is a constitutional monarchy, but it also has a parliamentary system, and so citizens elect members of parliament to the House of Commons. The Prime Minister is typically the leader of the majority party in the House of Commons by way of constitutional convention. In Germany, they have a federal republic as well, but they have a federal republic with a parliamentary system. Unlike the US, there's a federal republic with a presidential system. Germany is federal, but it has a parliamentary system. Citizens will elect members of the Bundestag, the federal parliament, which is headed by the Reichstag. The Chancellor, who is the head of government, is elected by the Bundestag. In India, they also have a federal republic, and they have a federal republic which is a parliamentary system. Citizens will elect members of the Lok Sabha, which is the House of the People, a bit like the House of Commons, if you will. And the Prime Minister is the leader of the majority party or coalition in that particular institution. With all that being said, then, what are the advantages of representative democratic systems? Well, a representative democracy is practical. It is practical for systems where we're talking about very large, very complex societies that are obviously going to require participation in a way that is not direct for the majority of people. Obviously, a direct democracy in the UK would be very difficult to coordinate, given how many pieces of legislation are passed, and also given the fact that we have 60+ million people who sit and are able to vote in this country. Elected representatives can develop expertise in specific areas of policy making, so it allows them to basically be able to have a certain degree of insight into what is best for the country, whether or not that decision may or may not be practical or even popular. So in certain circumstances, there might be a distinction between what is considered to be a popular decision in terms of policy making, but what is actually impractical and what is actually detrimental for the country as a whole. They have time and resources, therefore, to study issues in depth and to make considered judgments. So, for example, what the majority of the country think is best for education policy might not actually be what is best for education policy. You need experts who are able to study in depth those issues and then come to a decision as to what actually may be best for the country on basis of a reasoned understanding of how policy like that works. And so a representative democracy essentially allows for that to take place. It can also provide greater stability and continuity when it comes to government and to governance. Representatives will serve as fixed terms, and so what this does is provide a very long period of time for that government in question to actually be able to implement policy. Policy often is not implemented or able to be implemented overnight, and so as a result of which, a representative democracy can provide for greater stability and continuity in that idea of government. Finally then, while not all citizens participate directly in the decision-making process, they will have the opportunity to influence policies by making a decision about who they want to represent them. If you are somebody who is conservative in your beliefs and in your ideas, and you believe in the Conservative Party, you can go and elect a Conservative member of Parliament to your as your MP from your constituency, and they can represent your ideas and your interests in Parliament. If you are Liberal or if you are part of the Labour Party, you could do the same for those particular candidates as well. Finally then, what are the disadvantages of having a representative democracy? Well, one of the disadvantages is this idea of disconnection, the idea that there can be a disconnect between the representatives and their constituents. I, for example, have never met or have no indication or no understanding of who my MP actually is. I could find out a little bit about who my MP is, but I've never met my Member of Parliament. Most people would never meet their MP. And so this leads to decisions which do not accurately reflect the will of the people if you can't get a direct connection between yourself and your Member of Parliament. Of course, this can be mitigated through elections on a regular basis and mechanisms for accountability. You can write to your MP, for example. You can email your MP. You can go and actually have a direct meeting with your Member of Parliament as well, if you need to, but interestingly, these are the kinds of things that are able to mitigate this problem, not able to necessarily solve it completely. Representatives may also be unduly influenced by special interest groups, lobbyists, campaigning donors, pressure groups, and all of which can lead to them actually being able to vote in favour of the few over the many. They might actually skewer away from their interest of their constituents as a result of the pressure from their own party, through the system of whips, through the pressure of, like I said here, interest groups, lobbyists and pressure groups, and so as a result of which the best interest of their constituency may not necessarily be represented by them. Finally, citizens may be able to become disengaged from the political process if they feel that their vote doesn't actually matter. So, for example, if you're a long-lasting and long-term Labour voter who is sitting and living in a very, very conservative constituency, you might not feel like your vote is worth anything, because for the most part, everybody is always going to vote for the Conservatives in that area, and so you will always have a Member of Parliament who does not accurately reflect you. You might also vote for the candidate and vote for the person who you personally believe is the person that you believe in and ideologically represents you. They might go to Parliament, but you might not feel any actual change in the way the country is working. A lot of people tend to be quite disincentivized and quite apathetic towards government for that reason. They don't feel that their life is changing in any meaningful way, so why should they actually go out and vote in the ballot box to actually make a difference themselves? This can obviously be mitigated through civic education, through efforts to increase political participation, through being told about the reasons for greater participation in the democratic process. All of which, of course, is something that's going to be quite a long-term change that takes place at grassroots levels.